Most people think winning is what changes you. It doesn't. But losing for 9 years does. I'm Alex Gregory. I'm a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. And in this video today, I want to tell you a little bit about the 9 years before any wins. Because I think that's the story that's really worth telling. I want to tell you about some of the injuries, illnesses, some of the stress, the pressure, the fear, and the nerves. I want to tell you about that one injury 5 days before Olympic qualification and being told I was dropped from the Olympic team by a local newspaper reporter. And I want to tell you a little bit about what kept me going. Because whatever you're dealing with in life, at work, at home, at school, in sport, whatever it is in your life, I think that some of this might actually help. So stay with me for the next 10 minutes or so. I'm going to take you through the lowest parts of my journey. I guess they're the hardest things to talk about, the things that I probably talked least about over the years. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you 3 things that 9 years of failure taught me that winning 2 Olympic golds never could. Okay. Let's start at the beginning. I was 16, moving into 17, that sort of age range, and I knew nothing about rowing. I had no interest in it. I'd never watched rowing on TV. I had absolutely no desire to start. But a mate of mine went down to our local rowing club, just a short walk from our school, and he'd gone down on a taster day, and he said to me, "Alex, you've got to come and give rowing a go. You'll love it." And I palmed him off. No, not interested, not coming. But this guy wouldn't shut up about it. He kept pestering me, kept inviting me down. And so one day after a couple of months of this, I walked down to the river with him. And from the moment I put a boat on the water, I knew this was the thing for me. There was just something about rowing that grabbed my attention. And any rowers out there will understand that feeling. It was about being in nature, doing a movement that was hard, it was complicated, it was confusing, it was challenging, but it was an exciting opportunity. And it really grabbed my attention. I was terrible to start with, as everyone is in rowing, but I threw myself into it. And rowing's interesting. I'm not sure if this is the case with other sports, but it's very easy to see your progression when it comes to rowing. And if you decide you want to take it really far and see how far up the levels of the sport you can get, it's quite easy to start yourself on that journey. So pretty quickly after starting, I found myself putting my name forward for trials for the Great Britain team. You just put a letter in the post and enter yourself to that first trial. Well, I found myself doing well enough at that first trial to be invited to the second, the third, and so forth until I found myself at final trials. It's where selection happens for the World Championship in rowing. There's a World Championships every year, whether you're junior or under 23 age category or a senior. So I found myself at this final trials, and it was looking like I could potentially get in the quad, 4-man boat, to go to the World Championships that year, which were being held in Lithuania. I didn't know where Lithuania was, but it sounded awesome. Went up to the lake at Nottingham, got in my single scull. I didn't have to win it. I just had to come in the top 4 to make the boat, to go to Lithuania, to go to the World Championships. This is great. This is easy. This is going to happen. To cut a long story short, after 500 metres, I was in the position I needed to be in. Things were looking good. And then about the halfway marker, everything started to go wrong. This heaviness came over my body. My limbs grew heavy and slow. It felt like I wasn't rowing through water anymore, but thick mud. I was slowing down. And as I was slowing down, I could see my opposition coming, bearing down on me, getting closer and closer. And as that was happening, I started to panic and try harder and hyperventilate. And then this darkness came over the corner of my eyes and I blacked out in the boat. Capsized. I woke up upside down underwater, popped out of the water and watched everyone row on past me to the finish line. I was obviously taken out of selection. I was so embarrassed. It was a pretty mortifying moment, and I obviously didn't make the crew to go to the World Championships that year. It was my first initiation into racing at a high level. I was disappointed. I thought I wasn't good enough, wasn't tough enough, wasn't capable enough, but on reflection a couple of days later, I figured I'd done pretty well to get to that point so early on in my rowing career. And so I committed to try again, but little did I know, this was the start of things to come. So after that first disaster, I'd recovered enough to get back into training. The process was still very clear, very obvious. I still wanted to give it another go. So over the next few years, I went through that trialing process again. And by this point, I was leaving the junior category. I was leaving school. I was moving off to university. I continued to train very seriously. I was taking it very seriously. And every year I went through that trialing process. And actually after that, I got selected and I went off to World Championships every year after that first disaster. But what transpired was that I could do well enough to get selected. I could train well. I was committed. I enjoyed that side of it. But when it came to the big races where it really mattered, where the nerves started to come into play, where I really wanted to perform, I couldn't. And this happened year after year after year. After all these disasters, every year I would go home and I would reflect on it and I would wonder whether I was capable or good enough or tough enough or robust enough or interested enough. And the answer was always, yes, give it another go. Yes, give it another go. But a little bit of me was breaking each time. I was letting people down and it felt terrible. I was selected in the single to be the under-23 single sculler. But this is the thing, I could perform in training and I was improving in training. My times were improving, my performance, my technique, and things were good. And then it came to the World Championships. And I remember starting to feel seriously nervous months before. So I was constantly questioning myself. The internal dialogue was incessant. And we got to the World Championships and I couldn't move. I was almost paralysed by fear. But I didn't tell anyone. I remember my coach, he'd been incredible over all these years. And I remember him pushing me off for the race. And he said to me, Alex, are you all right? And I said, yep. I was good at putting this mask on. I would tell people I was fine. I would turn up to training day in, day out with a smile on my face. And yet inside I was being eaten away. And in actual fact, I was isolating myself from anyone, from anyone's help, because no one knew what I was going through. It was all kept inside. It was quite a miserable, lonely existence. I got onto the start line and could hardly move. I certainly couldn't race. And I don't even know where I came that year. I severely underperformed. It was getting bad. It was all coming to a head. Every year I found myself back on the river, back at training, trying again, just crossing my fingers, hoping something would change. But now I was a senior athlete and the Olympics were looming. And this was a make or break moment. It was now Olympic year. And I'd done well enough, as was my habit, to get selected in a boat, to go and try and qualify the boat for the Olympics. Now, if you don't qualify the year before the Olympics, there's a last chance saloon race and it's 2 months before the Olympic Games start. And we hadn't qualified the year before because of me. So it was our last chance. And then 7 days before we were due to fly to Lucerne in Switzerland to race this qualification race, I took a stroke on the lake. And as I took this normal training stroke, and by the way, bear in mind that I've been rowing for about 8.5 years by this time. 3 times a day, 7 days a week, 350 days a year. I had taken many, many millions of strokes. And on this one day, 7 days before the flight, I took a stroke and bam! I felt this stabbing pain in my side. I knew something bad had happened. I didn't say anything to the guys. We finished the session, I went off, and I didn't say anything for the next couple of days. But it grew to the point now 5 days before the flight where I had to flag it up to the medical team. I was immediately whisked off for an emergency scan and the results came back. I developed a stress fracture in my rib. It was a disaster. And the next day I got a phone call. I picked up the phone and it was a local news reporter from the local newspaper. And he asked me how I felt to be deselected from the Olympic squad. What? No one else had spoken to me. My team hadn't, my coaches hadn't. A local reporter told me the news that my career was over. How had that come about? In the back of my mind, I knew that that was probably going to be the case, but I assumed that I'd have some options, that I'd have a conversation about it, but that never happened. I was out. I was done. I felt like I'd wasted my life, but most importantly, I felt like I'd let people down again. Now, for the 8th year in a row, I'd let my team, my country, my coaches down, my family down, myself down, my teammates down. I'd let everyone down. And now I'd left a crew behind who had to go and try and qualify with only 5 days to prepare for the biggest race of their lives. I'd ruined it for everyone. It was time to hold my hands up, give up, and walk away. But I didn't. I stuck around mainly just to see the medical team to get my rib healed. I needed to figure my pathway out now. And I'm glad I did, because this is the most important period that I've ever had in my life. An opportunity and a decision was made right here in this time that changed the course of my life. It was Jürgen Grobler, the most successful Olympic sports coach in Olympic sport history. He was our head coach at the time, and he pulled me aside. And in his deep German accent, he said, "Alex, I want you to be spare man for the team." I couldn't understand it. Why was he asking me? Was he teasing me? Was it a joke? But he looked deadly serious. I found it hard to stand there in that moment. No, I couldn't take that opportunity. First of all, no one wants to be reserve. You're at the very bottom of the team. I already felt embarrassed. I didn't think I could cope with any more embarrassment. And not only that, the guys had missed out on qualification because I let them down. So they weren't going to the Olympics. I couldn't say yes to this. But Jürgen is a very powerful man, an amazing human being, and it's hard to say no to him. And I weighed it up there and then. Could I say yes? Could I take this opportunity? He was throwing me a lifeline. There must be a reason for it. So in that moment, I decided to grab Jürgen's lifeline, to jump on that plane to Beijing, and I figured that I'm never going to get to race in the Olympic Games. I'm never going to win an Olympic gold medal. But I could be the best spare man there has ever been. Maybe that's my level. Reserve in the Olympic team. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll be the best reserve that there's ever been. And that is the way I stepped foot on that plane and flew off to China and turned up at the Beijing Olympics. So I won't tell you the whole Beijing story now. That's a video for another time. But it was there on the sidelines that everything changed for me. My understanding about myself, purpose, effort, intention, teams, collaboration, performance, all changed in those 2 weeks. The trajectory of my life moved in a completely different direction. My approach to everything changed there. 4 years later, in front of a home crowd of 35,000 people, I won the Olympic gold with 3 of my amazing crewmates. In fact, 3 of the guys I had watched win gold while I was sitting on the sidelines in Beijing 4 years previously. People ask me, what was that feeling like when you crossed the line? And I remember it very clearly. My honest answer is relief, pure relief. Thank goodness that race is over, that day, that week, month, year, 4 years, 8 years, 12 years to that point. All those disappointments, struggles, failures, embarrassing moments, all that questioning, all that wonder, all that struggle had been worth it. It hadn't been a waste of time. It had all been a pathway to that point. And I think that relief probably tells you something about what 9 years of failure can teach us. Winning gold there on home water was extraordinary. But coming back to my 3 points. The first point, failures aren't the final verdict. They may feel uncomfortable, disappointing, the end in the moment, but they're not. They're just simply pieces of information. They're simply stepping stones that allow you to move on from that. So whatever failure feels like for you right now in your life, just remember that it's a piece of information and it's what you do with that information that matters. Often we need to give ourselves the opportunity to step back and see those stepping stones, see those failures laid out behind us. We've experienced them, we've been through them, we've been hurt by them, disappointed by them, moved by them. How do we use them now for our future? The second lesson is that when you feel there's no light at the end of the tunnel, bring your own light. We've all experienced times where there's seemingly no end to this struggle and discomfort. When these failures are racking up in numbers behind you, when you don't believe, when you're losing faith, bring your own light. And that comes from habit. For me in those years, often it was easier to continue than to stop. Despite the discomfort, despite the uncertainty, despite the questions, despite the embarrassment, despite the failures, habit helps us build consistency. And consistency when you're in the dark is the hardest thing, but it's the thing that matters the most. And that's one of the biggest lessons I learned from Jürgen, from being in his squad, in his teams, in his crews. Consistency is key, and that can provide a light. And finally, the third point, you have to be willing to be honest with yourself. It's the thing that I found the toughest. It's the thing that I resisted the most. For whatever reason, and I think quite often we do. But if you can be honest, truly honest with yourself, hold your hand up to yourself and to others, then real change really starts to happen. In truth, I came up with excuses. I became numb to the reality. And I just continued on this treadmill that I'd been walking for years and years before. And it always led to the same point: pressure, stress, fear, and ultimately failure. All because I'd been blocking, resisting, looking at myself. What did I need? Who was I really? What was my purpose? Why was I doing this? Who did I need to ask for help? When you unblock yourself, look deep inside, then the whole world can open up for you. Now, these 3 lessons came from the failures, the losses, not the wins. So this channel is my opportunity to share some of the things that I've learned along the way. I'm going to be sharing technique tips for rowing, workouts, strength workouts, rowing workouts, mindset ideas, some lessons, some thoughts, some insights, and generally a bit of my life as a 42-year-old trying to maintain, build a fitness and the roller coaster that comes with that. And to incorporate a busy life, running businesses, raising children, living the life that I'm lucky enough to do in the countryside with animals and the menagerie that I have. So if any of this has been useful today, if any of it resonates, then have a think about subscribing and you'll see the next video pop up very soon. All right, have a good one. See you there.